Welcome to the Out on a Limb podcast. We are all interconnected to a greater web of consciousness. Our aim is to open your mind to a new world through having open-minded discussions about what we perceive our reality to be.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Out on a Limb podcast with your hosts, Will and Allison and Samantha. And today we have another special guest for you, Patricia Grootjens, all the way from the Netherlands. Patricia we're going to have such a good conversation today. She has a wealth of knowledge about a lot of topics. She is a QHHT, or quantum healing hypnosis technique practitioner, also a beyond quantum healing practitioner. She's an astrologer and an author. She had a near-death experience, which placed her on the path of her quantum healing, and it connected her with the spirit of water, which is going to be a really neat topic to cover. In her sessions, Patricia explores not only water, but fascinating topics such as the Bermuda Triangle, Atlantis, mermaids, Kundalini, and our cosmic origin, which is exciting to me, of course. That's after my own heart there. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you.
Excited.
And I finally get to meet Will because I've heard so much about your husband, of course. So now I finally see you.
and likewise, Allison, you two correspond quite a bit, whether it's on the forum or whatever. And I always hear the name Patricia coming up in different little circles and conversations. So it's excellent to put a face with the name. So
Patricia and I met on the Quantum Healing Forum. So if you are a practitioner, by the way, of any modality, you are welcome to join quantumhealers.com. Candace Carl Goldman founded that along with a couple of other modalities. And so Patricia and I met many years ago there, and she graciously had me on her YouTube channel, on her podcast, talking about the journey within, the Christian perspective and all of that.
Oh, wow.
So now we are returning the favor. So I want to start with your background, Patricia, because you did mention that the NDE kind of propelled you onto this trajectory. But what was happening prior to that in terms of your upbringing, religious or atheist, or how did all that work? And what age were you when the NDE happened?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I grew up without religion, although my father was kind of religious, but he believed in God, but he didn't believe in the institute of a religion. But I had a very spiritual father, and I think that triggered my own spiritual development because he was clairvoyant and he knew what was going to happen. He was very sensitive, and he sometimes could see ETs. And he was reading all the books from Daniken, like Were the Gods Astronauts. So I grew up with his influence. And but it was also kind of a bit of our thing. Like, we could talk about these subjects with each other, but there weren't many people with whom we could talk about it. But it did trigger my spiritual journey, and I think I was quite young when I had my own clairvoyant experiences with angels. And I was 12 years old when I started practicing astrology. Oh. And I've never stopped doing that. So I'm also an astrologer. And I was always fascinated by what comes after death, because my father used to see people who were dead, and he always knew when people would die. So this whole theme about there's life after death was something that was not new to me. And so when I started studying astrology, there was also the topic that I kind of specialized in, like past lives in the birth chart, the karmic development, the esoteric astrology. And so I came to realize that the birth chart itself is almost like a holographic chart. It can bring us into contact with past lives, this life, but also future lives. So, but going to my own near-death experience, I think that was in 2007. And well, it was a really complicated situation that led to that near-death experience. I don't want to go too deep into that situation. It was also a bit traumatic, so I don't want to go too deep into that part of the event. But what happened was that at some point I lost consciousness and I was out for nearly 2 days. And during those 2 days, I saw my whole life passing by like a movie that was being played backwards. And it went all the way to the moment of birth, and it went further back in time to the time in the womb, and then even further back in time to past lives. And I felt I could see every life that I had ever lived until I finally came to the point where it went dark, as if I was going through something. And then finally it was all light. And I felt I was in pure God consciousness, in pure love and pure peace and unity consciousness. It felt as if I was connected with everything on earth, in the cosmos, as if I was every cloud, every tree, every animal, as if all our souls were all connected. So there was such a profound experience, life-changing, of course. So when I came back to consciousness, it felt as if I fell back onto the earth with a big bang. Anyway, it was a very difficult time, and it took a while before I slowly recovered. But by the time that I did recover, I discovered the work of Dolores Cannon, and I found out that she could bring people through the hypnotic state to that place where I had been, to that state of consciousness where I had been during my near-death experience. And I thought, wow, if there's a way to bring people to that state of unity consciousness, to that state beyond all our incarnations, I think I want to learn that. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started QHHT, and I was luckily enough to have been trained by Dolores while she was still alive.
Wow.
And of course, after that, when she passed away, I was already in close contact with Candace, and she started BQH, and I found that a revelation, because it opened so many doors and it felt so liberating. Not to say anything negative about QHHT, but I felt BQH was really expanding, and I think that's the whole point of, my point of doing consciousness therapies like quantum healing is to expand our consciousness and to expand our understanding of who we are and why we are here. And I think that they say the more you know, the less you know, and that's where I feel that I'm at. And but when I look back at that near-death experience, I think when I first woke up from that state, being out of consciousness, I couldn't speak, I couldn't talk, I couldn't count. There were many things that I couldn't do. But I was in an isolated situation, so I couldn't see a doctor. That took a really long time before I could finally get to a doctor. So I had to bring myself back functioning again. And so I really felt lonely because I felt there wasn't anyone that was going to help me. And I thought, okay, I need to do this myself. And it took a long while before I could read. So it was months before I opened my computer and opened my email. But when I finally did, and I started to see, like, there must be a bunch of emails, like if you haven't opened your email for months, And there was an email that stood out for me, and it had the name Yemanja. And when I was reading the message, it said, your health will improve. It's crossing symptoms, but we see you in the light of love. And I felt as if I was being guided, and I thought, who is Yemanja? And anyway, I closed my computer, and when I tried to open it a few days later, the email was gone. And I felt that it was a message from Spirit. So I became curious, like, who is Yemanja? And then, of course, I found out that this is a water goddess, and I think she originally came from Africa and was brought to South America through Santeria, I think. And she's well known in the South American countries. But when I realized that she was a water goddess, I started to open myself up. So I was like, okay, Jamantja, if you were really having this message for me, then I'm open to receive more messages. So that's where I started to communicate and receive messages from her. And she told me that I would find healing through water. And she said that I would become a water ambassador. And I had no idea, no clue what that could possibly mean. And so it took quite a while before I finally started to get an understanding of what that could mean. And I think that was also when I started doing the training with Dolores Cannon, because a level 2 class was in Glastonbury. And when we were in Glastonbury, I was also receiving a lot of messages. And one day when we were at the tour, you probably know the tour in Glastonbury, very spiritual place, of course. And I started to receive downloads, and I received a message like, "You're going to be a messenger." And so slowly I came to the understanding, like, what kind of messenger would that be? But I discovered that, okay, maybe I can be a messenger for water, because I've learned to understand, and that's just my perspective. Of course, I don't hold the truth. It's just my perspective. But that water is very closely connected to source. And I really believe that water is source.
Wow.
And, but again, I wouldn't want to say that I do understand what water is, because the more I think that I understand what water is, the more I think, no, I have no idea. There's so much about water that I don't understand and don't know what it is. But I do know that it's really closely related to the source of life, to what brings life and what gives life. And just before I went into this call, I just realized that today is the day of Mary Magdalene. And
that's
Very
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Interesting. Wow.
And of course, Mary Magdalene. Sorry,
Well,
yes.
I want to ask. So, okay, I mean, how does one find out that today is the day of Mary Magdalene? Where? Because I know on my calendar, on my phone or anywhere. So, is there? I mean, it's a good resource to know. I mean, I would love to have access to that, or is that, where is that published, or where would I find that? Where would our audience find that if they wanted to find those types of things?
Well, I think the internet. I just received like 3 messages from people before I went into this call, and then I saw they all mentioned this is the day of Mary Magdalene. But I do know that it's. Could it be Catholic? That Catholics, they give names to certain.
Maybe, yeah.
That might be it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I believe that it comes from that, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Like I said, I wasn't brought up religious, so I have no knowledge about the Bible. I only know what I receive through spirit.
Absolutely.
Which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it makes it more valid, honestly. Because
Yes.
when Will started channeling Enoch, who was his first guy that came through, he had no idea who Enoch was. He was not raised with a biblical understanding.
No.
So to me, it made it valid, because he said, we talked to somebody named Enoch. I'm like, Enoch, are you kidding me? Because I was raised in the church and I knew who Enoch was, and that was a big deal to me.
Yeah.
Did Mary Magdalene have a special relationship with water then? What's the connection? Or is it coincidental?
What I thought is that because I wrote in my new book, The Healing Light of Water, I wrote about the session that I did with B, and we always dive into these sessions without intention. We just see what comes up. So one day we received, I call it an initiation from Mary Magdalene. And it was called the White Rose initiation. That's how she called it. And it was really a message about for all those women who give birth in situations that are unusual, like women who give birth to, out of wedlock, how do you call that?
Yeah.
Or women who get pregnant through all kind of difficult circumstances and situations, and where there's always a lot of shame around it. And in that session, we were going through my family lineage and through my ancestors and all the women in the ancestral line, and going to my grandmother, who had like 7 siblings, and her mother wasn't able to marry with a man with whom she had 7 children. And so there was this whole theme about children being born out of marriage. And so that's where she was kind of giving her message to, like, there's a lot of shame around it. And this shame is being transferred through all the generations. Mm. And she said, people should know that there is not one child that's being born where there should be any sense of shame or guilt, because every child that is being born is sacred. Every birth, every new life that is entering this world is sacred. So there should never be any shame around it, no matter what the circumstances are. And so she was kind of giving a healing through the womb, but not only my womb during that session, but the womb of my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and all the women in that lineage. And she said it was really actually for all women on earth. It wasn't specifically for us. It was for every woman. And so, of course, life and birth starts in the womb, in the water,
right,
in the womb. And so this is how Mary Magdalene is connected to the water, I believe, and to the water of life, and where life starts. And so, yes, if you ask me what is the connection with Mary Magdalene and water, I think that's it, the theme of birth, childbirth. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And thank you for that. And we're not going to divulge a whole lot that happened before we came on with you today either, but we also had a very interesting connection with Mother Mary and with giving birth and all of that sort of stuff.
Mary Magdalene.
Really?
Right. I'm sorry.
Yep.
But it's fascinating that you're bringing this up. I mean, we're all looking at each other.
That's
going,
why
oh
we
my
all
God.
stopped and went, oh my gosh. And I think
So I'm glad you brought that up.
but I
actually.
think that's information that we need to
Yes,
carry. Like,
definitely.
you just fed a huge piece to us that we needed to know.
Exactly.
That's
yeah.
just,
Really?
Yeah.
for a person that we know.
Yes.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned this, because before I went to this call, I wanted to look up and reread my chapter in my book about Mary Magdalene, because she gave us a certain amount of numbers that was significant. And she said, you have to remember these numbers. These numbers are layers in the DNA. And she said, you need to discover what these numbers mean. But I still don't know. But before I got into this call, I had a hunch that maybe one of you would have the intuition of what it could mean. So would you mind if I would mention these numbers?
Fun. Go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And don't feel any pressure. Maybe you don't get anything, but maybe
one of the commenters,
Right.
one of our
One of our
viewers might
viewers
comment
might,
on
yeah,
it. So.
Oh, yes.
So
yes,
we'll
of
play-
course.
We'll play along. Absolutely. Go for it.
Well, she said that if you would tune into the DNA, she said it has many layers, and we're not able to discover all the layers yet scientifically, but she said, remember these numbers: 33, 47, 88, 888, and 1024.
Mm.
And to be honest, I have been trying to discover it with my logical mind, but I don't understand it with my logical mind. So maybe if there is someone who has an intuition about what this could mean, about the information in the DNA, because she said that these numbers in the DNA would bring us back to our cosmic ancestors.
Oh my
It would
gosh.
give us information about who our cosmic ancestors are.
Girl, this
So
this conversation is going in tangents that I had no idea that are phenomenal. Phenomenal. This is amazing. Okay, there's a there, and I'm definitely going to investigate that.
Yes, and what we'll do is we'll actually post call, as we're wrapping up, we're going to get the quote right out of your book, and we'll put that associated with the numbers in the show notes, so that way it's precisely the way it was brought through from the book. So
yeah,
Plus all
that's
of your
great.
book information down there, so
yeah, for
people
sure.
can order that and have that. That's valuable. And that's not your only book, by the way. So we'll have all of her books down there.
Yep.
Okay, so we could go on with this for a long time.
Which
However,
which thread would you like to pull?
we promised viewers we would talk about the water. So I do want to talk about the water a little bit. We know that water is hugely important. There are rituals in every religion that have to do with water, baptism, all of this sort of stuff. The birth water, of course, in the womb. Even Candace, when she was developing Beyond Quantum Healing, does a water alchemy at the beginning so that we can set an intention and broadcast that through water. Water is hugely important. In fact, yesterday,
Yep.
we just did what we intuited this process, but we call it a water-infused Reiki healing attunement, and we do that in our pool every summer. This was the 6th time we've done this, and every time that we do it, it is so profound. So everybody lines up along the edges of the pool. I provide some Reiki into their heart chakra from behind, and Will channels their own higher self for whatever message they need, and it's amazing when it's amplified by the water.
Yep.
So needless to say, water is important, and I do want to set this up before I ask you these questions, but if our audience is not familiar with Emoto, E-M-O-T-O, he's probably the most famous person who is affiliated with research on water.
Is it Mori Emoto?
Masoro, or however you say it. I don't know how to say his
Emoto.
first
Okay,
name.
that's it.
But get those books and look at the beautiful designs, because he would take water, he tapes the word love on some water or the word hate on some water, whatever. It's more complicated, but this is the gist of it. Giving loving energy to one set of water and not loving energy or no attention to the other water, and then taking a drop of that and freezing it, and then looking at the crystalline structure that comes from that. And you can see the beauty, the beautiful crystalline structures from the words gratitude and love and all of that, and the discordant crystalline structure that happens when the water is either unattended or negatively impacted. And from that research, Veda Austin is probably the next most famous person who is doing all of this work along those same lines, pulling water from different places and slicing it and showing images and all kinds of amazing stuff. Now, Patricia, for I think the 2nd year in a row, was invited to speak at her conference, correct? At Veda Austin's conference. So tell us what you talk about in those conferences, obviously in a nutshell, but what are the most important concepts our audience needs to know about water?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was a guest speaker during 2 of her conferences. And in the first one, I talked about Atlantis and about the Bermuda Triangle. So I think it would be nice maybe if we could touch upon that.
Definitely.
And in the last conference, which was a week ago, we talked about near-death experiences and how water is related to the process of dying. And I think what stayed with me the most, and I think Veda is really a magnificent person, she really continued where Emoto stopped. And she's teaching people now how to photograph our water and to freeze our water. And she has discovered that water has a language, that it creates its own images and symbols for different kind of words. And so it's really a whole world if you tune into that. It's fantastic. But what stood out most for me during the last webinar was how she was also explaining that when a person dies, we often see as if there's this kind of cloud evaporating from the body that is leaving the body. And she said, this is actually the water, the essence, the spirit of the soul of the person, but also it's the water that evaporates. So water does carry our soul back to source. And when she said that, when she mentioned it, that really reminded me about, well, maybe a silly example, but when my dog passed away a few years ago, a Jack Russell dog, and really strong character. You know how Jack Russells are.
Boundless.
And she was 15 years old. And when she passed away, we buried her in the garden. And me and my two sons were doing all kind of rituals and prayers and, making beautiful things. And finally, it was becoming dark. And so we decided to go in. And then my son called me back. He said, "Mom, look at the sky." And then we saw, I mean, it was dark, it was, the sky was black with stars. And so it's really dark. And then we could see it as if there was this purple blue cloud going all the way up. And I felt like, there she goes.
Oh.
There she goes back to source.
Amazing.
And that was the same kind of visual that Veda described when water leaves the body, when our soul leaves the body, and it disappears just like this cloud. And so I thought that was so beautiful. I mean, I think that's what happens. I mean, they say that when a person dies, then the body weight is less within a few minutes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's actually, yes, that's probably the soul that's being lifted.
Yeah.
Before anything else is being released from the body, I think it's the soul that's being, and it's so strongly connected to water, I believe. Yeah.
Isn't that
And of course, I think there are many other ways how I feel that water is related to the bridge to going back to source. And what I also found interesting is that during this webinar about near-death experiences, many people became fascinated by water after their near-death experience. So it's as if that what is giving us life is drawing us into the direction of water. And I think that what is giving us life is water. So, yeah, I thought that was really remarkable. Yeah.
I don't know if this is related at all, but I was just thinking about how, we always talk about the Rainbow Bridge and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's created because of water and light,
Exactly.
Right?
That's a very good point, Samantha.
And to what we're saying, it's, we're carried in through the birthing process via water, and we're carried out through
that was her point.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's just amazing how, and I've never really put it in that context, but I think it means more as we're talking about it today because of what we did yesterday in the pool with 10 beautiful people. And it was just, I was the last one to enter into the pool after smudging and preparing and getting everybody in the pool. And as soon as I walked into the pool, it overtook. I mean, I have to take a minute to adjust. And it's our pool. I'm in it every day. But when there's that amount of energy, that amount of essence in the pool, it's overwhelming. And now to understand the carrier and how we've talked about it over and over. We've channeled water ourselves, but you don't, when it kind of you put it in a different context, it really starts to make sense. And I'm very fascinated by these numbers. They're rolling around.
Oh my God, I'm doing the same thing.
So yeah,
I don't know what you said, Patricia. From that point on, they're working on the numbers.
No, they're in there. No, I'm not trying to think about them, but yeah, they're definitely going to be cooking around, cooking in there for a while.
Yeah. But then it stops spiraling and it goes out in these rays.
Yeah.
I keep going between the spiral, and it's I don't know if that's the Fibonacci, but then it goes.
There's too many coincidences here with all of this. There's definitely a purpose here because I'm also doing some work with the Sophia Code, the book called the Sophia Code. And in that, there are 8 divine feminine initiations, one of which is Mary Magdalene. I haven't gotten to her yet. I'm only on week 1. So this is also purposeful. This whole conversation.
Interesting.
But,
well, and you think about it, so like what you guys did in the pool and what you're talking about, like my number one favorite thing I always tell clients of mine is that if you're feeling stressed or whatever, or just periodically throughout the day, run your hands underwater, if nothing else. And I said, and sometimes you're going to want it cold and sometimes you're going to want it warm, and listen to yourself and just bask in it.
Exactly.
There's something with the whole water.
Yeah.
I want to say, though, what's interesting is we talk about water is life. And when we channeled water, that was one of the first things that water said was water is life. But what's interesting is water is not life necessarily on other planets either. On our planet, it's necessary for life. But on other planets where there are bodies or beings that don't need water to survive in the same way that we do for our physicality, water is used for transportation and water is used for communication, which is fascinating, I thought. And also the atmosphere that surrounds Earth is water, and that helps us to communicate. So when we think we're telepathically communicating with somebody on the other side of the planet, water is helping to carry that message through our atmosphere. So I thought that was really neat.
That's so interesting that you mentioned that, because during one of the sessions that I did with B, we came into contact with an interdimensional being. He called himself the Cosmic Traveler, but he started to share information about what he called cosmic water.
Plasma.
Exactly.
Yes.
Plasma. Exactly.
Yes. Because water also told us that water has way more than, we think, only 3 properties or forms or whatever, and plasma being the 4th one, but that there are many more than that we don't understand in our physical world. Continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Exactly.
It's trippy, though. The more you learn about water, the more you just go, like, it begins to define what we logically think that it is, and it's like, oh, no, it's so much
right.
So much
more.
Tell us, what did Cosmic Traveler say also?
Yes. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that 4th phase of water, because there's a scientist, Dr. Gerald Pollack, who wrote many books about that there's a 4th phase of water, which is like the jelly state of water. And that's also the same state that Veda Austin is using when she's using her method to freeze water and to photograph it. And because she takes a picture of the water when it's in between the state of being completely frozen and fluid. So there's this state in between where it becomes a bit jelly, like very dense water. And this is the state where water seems to be able to communicate with us. And so it's really in line with what you say. And what this Cosmic Traveler said is that the cosmic water, which is also a plasma field, he said it contains potential, as if everything that is available in that field is a field of potential.
Yes.
And he said it really is like the etherical layer of the earthly waters. And he said, but also our internal water. So if we are tuning into our body water, our internal water, at the same time, we are also tuning into the earth water and to the cosmic water. He says it's all connected.
Yes.
So the cosmic water is in communication with the rivers, the oceans, but also the water in our beings.
Yeah.
So I thought it was so interesting. And it also explains to me, well, maybe not exactly, but it makes sense how mediums receive their information. I think it is partially coming from that field, that cosmic water, that cosmic ocean. And I think that's so fascinating. And there's so much to learn about that and to discover.
Right, because water also told us that the amount of water that's on our planet, that our planet was created with this amount of water, and that's the same amount of water that still exists. That we have not lost water, we have not gained water. It's all of that water has been here since Earth's history, the entire history when Earth began. So when you think about that all the water that's in us, the water we drink, the oceans, all of that, the atmosphere, it's all just being recycled, and it holds the entire history of our planet. So when you ingest water, when you use water, when you bathe in water, you are bathing or ingesting entire Earth's history. And all of the physical beings that have ever been on our planet, all of the information that's ever happened on everything.
It gives a whole new meaning to alphabet soup.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
Well, I know that, so you were just saying how it contains information. I know that when I tell people, so I go to like what I refer to as the field of probabilities, and that's how I'm able to feel certain things out.
Samantha's a medium, by the way. We didn't explain that.
Ah.
That's what she works with clients
So
with.
yeah, so I've never really thought about it, but the way I experience it's not a void, and it's not. If I'm going to give it a substance, it's like plasma. And I never really thought about that. Yeah. It's not nothing. It's not air. It is, a viscous substance,
Wow.
I never really thought about that because it
Right.
has shape. It has it's not just flat, but it
Interesting.
exists.
Yeah, I mean, and so now knowing that and understanding that process, it helps me understand through my training as a medium of, shifting my frequency. Well, I'm really, in essence, what I'm doing is I'm shifting my frequency into that plasmic field or into that cosmic water field. I'm shifting my frequency field into that so it vibrates so that we both can communicate at that point.
A different density.
A different density.
Yeah.
That's where density comes into play.
Yeah, it helps me understand it a little bit better, other than just because it is such an abstract area when you work in that. So it gives a little bit of form to that. But also going back to the, many of the, what do they call them? The trance mediums in Europe and whatnot that bring through the
Plasma.
ectoplasm when they go into those deep trance states and bring forth an actual physical field of plasma. You're bringing forth that life essence of that loved one back into a physical presence in the room. So it's very, it's fascinating. My brain is like right now, it's like,
We're all over the place.
I love it. It's absolutely.
We had no idea.
This is fascinating.
So I
Wait,
want
so
to get
that was
into some
this-
other topics, but do you have a question on this particular?
Yeah, well, one was,
Before we
I
move?
didn't know if this applied, but, we've all had those water dreams. But I don't know if that would.
Talk to us about water dreams. A lot of us are having dreams of rising water.
Reoccurring dreams, yeah.
Our understanding when we channel about that is that it's the consciousness rising. But what do you understand
But
about?
it's in water, isn't it? The
Yes.
consciousness is water.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think there are kind of different kind of dreams. I think there are the dreams where we are having out of body experiences. I think there are dreams that are just for processing our daily experiences. So it depends on what kind of dream about water it is. But I do feel that it is connecting us with the source or maybe other parts of our soul. Because when we are in the dream state, we're actually also in between states, similar to when we have a near-death experience. And I think that was also some of the things that we talked about during the near-death experience webinar, that it kind of has a similar consciousness to the dream state. But it's very real. And it's another reality. It's another reality. That's what it is.
Exactly.
And it feels as if water is being the thing that can transport us. And I think what it really comes down to, I believe, is that water has the ability to help us to bilocate to other places. And maybe that's also what we do in dreams when we dream about water.
Exactly, because that's what water said, what other beings on other planets are doing, that they're using this for transportation. So,
Yes.
that's how I guess that would work. It would help to transport your consciousness and communicate at the same time, because we know that travel involves consciousness when you get into the upper dimensions.
I mean, just from I'll say, a earthly plane understanding of communicating via water. I mean, look at whales and other mammals. They can communicate thousands of miles through water through vibrational field, and it's
True. They don't need the strings attached and all that kind of stuff. They just
so
no wires.
They already understand how to tap into that field of communication through a substance of water, and and for us, when we shift our vibration, when we put the intention behind water, when we work with water, we're just barely scratching the surface of what we understand and what
sure.
we know. But when you feel it, you understand it. When you get it, you understand it. But it's just, we go into it and then we come out. We just never fully, envelop ourselves in it. So.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a good segue
Okay.
to beings that live in the water. Mermaids.
Exactly.
What's about
Oh, you should
mermaids?
put your little mermaid up here.
I should have. I have a little stuffed mermaid.
Ah, well, when you were talking, it did remind me of mermaids. During the sessions that I did with B, we also entered, well, I should actually say lives as mermaids. Normally, when we do a session, I feel that I'm channeling certain beings as if they want to communicate through me. But when we did the mermaid session, something completely different happened. The moment that I got into the trance state, it felt as if my breathing changed, as if I was breathing underwater. It felt as if I couldn't see clearly, as if I was looking through a glass of water, like nearly blind. I also felt as if I had two extra eyes just above the eyebrows. And but yeah, it sounds strange, I know, but I really became that mermaid in that session, and I could feel how that was physically to be a mermaid. And so what I could feel and see is that how the breathing was very different, almost like how a dolphin would breathe. The vision was very different, like as if they weren't seeing through their physical, biological eyes, but they had these energetical eyes. And so this is how they could see. And so at one point, we asked if they were really physical beings or interdimensional beings. And then they explained that they can be seen as interdimensional beings, but they have the ability to create with their vision. So they see something in their consciousness, and then they can create an etherical body, let's say, and that etherical body can become denser and denser and denser until it becomes a physical body. So I asked, how do you procreate? So is this like humans do or dolphins do? And they said, no, it's just like we can draw a map, we can draw a design, an energetical design, and we put our consciousness into that design, and then it becomes more dense and dense and dense until it becomes a physical body. And she said, because we can do that very quickly, within a second, we can also evaporate that same physical body until the state of being spirit again. And she said, this is also why we can travel interdimensionally. She said, within a blink of an eye, we can be present here, let's say in the waters of the Pacific Ocean. And then within a few seconds, we can be in some lake in Michigan, for example.
Right.
And so I said, well, that's kind of like bilocation, isn't it? And she said, yes, that's kind of similar to how bilocation would work. It's like sending your consciousness first, and then drawing all the other layers to that as if it becomes more dense and dense. I think that's so interesting.
Which
Yeah,
probably
and
has something to do with drawing plasma. I bet it is sort of plasmic in nature.
exactly. And this is also good that you mentioned it, because every time we enter a mermaid session, we enter a cave underwater. It's like an underwater cave.
Oh, wow.
And there's this like a curtain of energy. And we kind of step through that veil or curtain. And I know that it is plasma. And I don't know why I know it, or I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
But somehow I know that it is a plasma field, like a curtain of plasma energy.
Right.
And the moment we step into through that curtain, through that veil, yeah, we enter in another dimension. it's another state of being. It's so fascinating. And to have that physical sensation that it's actually happening, so real. Yeah.
Sorry, this is reminding me of a dream that it's like it's so real to me, where I had gone down into the ocean, with suit on or whatever. And I get to this area where there's this kind of archway, but it's made of like coral or something. And I stepped through into this, it's like you could feel the density that you were stepping out from, or it was lighter on the outside and then heavier on the inside. But when you stepped on the inside, you no longer needed the suit or anything. You could just be and breathe. And but it wasn't like you were breathing with your lungs, but you were just existing. So it just sounds so similar to that.
It's so similar.
Oh, wow. That is weird.
Yeah. Interesting.
I want to make sure
Yeah,
we
what
get back to that.
What was also interesting is when we went to Kansas to meet with Candace and to participate in one of her immersion classes, we were volunteering or whatever. And so Candace put us under as a tandem session.
Myself and Allison. Yeah.
Which is fascinating. So where we went was, I went to a mermaid life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Which is interesting because I had never explored that before or heard that I had been a mermaid. And so then Will shows up in the life.
Apparently was the
kind of the creature from the Black Lagoon type of thing. I loved him, but he looked a little scary physically. So he didn't show himself to humans very often. But that was just such a neat. And so it was there that I bought my little stuffed mermaid. That's what was happening. See, I had never had such a vivid experience in a quantum healing session before. And so my guides wanted me to know that this was real, that it really happened. I wasn't making it up, right? So we go literally across the street to dinner. And in this restaurant, they have
in the middle of Kansas,
tiny little gift shop at the beginning with just a few things. One of the things they had was a basket full of stuffed mermaids. I'm like, really?
Yeah, that's too weird.
5 minutes later, my guides are like, yes, this was real. So I bought a stuffed mermaid and I kept it. I should have brought it up here, but that's amazing.
Yep.
So
wow.
I do want to, is this another topic?
Well, I think that it was the first session she'd been in with Veda. I can't remember, but you had brought up Atlantis and the Bermuda Triangle. And I want to make sure we have time to talk.
We're going to the Bermuda Triangle right now.
All
That's
right.
what Yes. Tell us what you know. What's the secret of the Bermuda Triangle? Right.
Well, that was also kind of interesting because at some point we delved into that Bermuda Triangle, and B was she has such a great gift of asking questions, and she's really good at that. So she started to ask all kind of practical questions about the Bermuda Triangle. And so they said it was like, we could compare it with a train station or a tube. Mm-hmm. And they said there are multiple stations on the Earth where there are vortexes, because they say it's a vortex, of course.
Yeah.
And and when you go into that vortex without knowing and without any intention, you may get lost because you don't know where you're going, and you could go anywhere. You can get lost. So they said if you would go into a vortex just like the Bermuda Triangle, you should do that with a clear intention. Like, where would you want to go? And this doesn't have to be a physical destination, but it could be a destination of like, I want to go to this experience or this emotion, or so it doesn't necessarily have to be a place. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. And they said, as soon as you go into a vortex like the Bermuda Triangle with the intention, you can go anywhere within a split second. And you could go to other planets. You could go to the other side of this planet. And they mentioned in that session that the authorities actually know that this exists. And this is also being used to spy on other parts of the world, to use these vortexes, these kind of tunnels. Yep. To visit other places without being seen or without having to cross borders. So that was really interesting, of course.
Now, to be clear, B is a friend of yours from the forum, correct?
Exactly. She's
and that you do sessions together just to explore
Yes.
different topics, as opposed to Veda, who was the person who's studying water and that you were speaking at her conference.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned Atlantis in connection with Bermuda Triangle. I just know that
Yeah.
was at the beginning, and anybody who held on to that, I want to make sure
Yeah.
that they
Yeah,
get
yeah,
that answer. So how is that connected?
Well, when we explored the location of the Bermuda Triangle, they said that it was where Atlantis was once located. But they also said that Atlantis wasn't one place on Earth, that there were several places that are connected to Atlantis. So it's not like Atlantis was only here or only there. No, there were several places where, how do you say that? The society of Atlantis was happening. And there was a very interesting experience that I shared during that webinar about Atlantis. Well, several experiences. So maybe I'm thinking which one should be interesting to share now. Well, I think I once went into a regression spontaneously, and I found myself laying on a stone table. It looked like the crystal onyx, and I knew that it wasn't onyx, and I knew that it was not on Earth. And there were scientists standing around me. They looked like doctors, but they were not exactly the doctors as we know them now. But they were bringing in some kind of tubes, like thin needles, but they were of a not earthly material. So it wasn't like as if someone would put a needle into your skin or into the flesh or into a vein or anything. It seemed to go through the body energetically, and it sounds strange. But what they were doing, they were trying to insert an embryo, and they were trying to create a hybrid species. Like they wanted to create a new species, and this would become the human beings as we know today. And but what happened during that experiment, and the moment came when the child would be born, I felt a huge love for the child, and I really felt a strong connection with the soul of the child. But they didn't want that. They didn't want me to get attached to that soul, because they were planning to take it away from me as soon as it was born, because they had their plans with that child, and they didn't want me to get attached to it. So that was happened. The child was born, and they took it away from me, and I felt devastated. I could really feel that, when they take your child away. And but suddenly I could see that they were panicking, and they were walking around, and the child died. And that moment I could hear the soul of that child communicating with me and saying, like, they can do whatever they want. They can try to create a new species, but I, as a soul, have a choice. And I do not want to be part of an experiment where they have planned to raise me without love, within a very static environment. And he says, my soul is free, and I choose not to be a part of that. So that was very emotional, but for me, it felt as if I could see a whole movie playing very quickly, and I could see Atlantis going down, as if everything was being destroyed. And somehow I felt responsible, as if they saw it as if it was my failure for the experiment to fail. And somehow I knew that this was my first incarnation on Earth. And I felt this huge responsibility for the collective. And I also felt as if my first step onto the Earth was also connected with failure. Like I failed, and it was a huge responsibility.
Wow.
But I had to stay true to my own morals and my heart. I had to stay true to my heart. And what they were doing It was not a heart-based experiment. And the moment that I realized that, I could see this huge, I call him huge because his energy was so huge, standing next to me. And I knew it was Jesus, but not in his identity as Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that he had been with me for many incarnations on other planets, and that he said they want to create a hybrid species, but they missed something. They missed love. They missed that it has to be done with love. So I had this realization that they took the DNA of several beings from several planets, and they called it the group. So it was like a collective of planets, and they called it the group. I know that Venus was involved, and Andromeda, Antares was involved, and there were more planets. But what Jesus said, he said, it's not important from which planet it came. It's just a collective, and overall, we all come from source, so it's not relevant from which planet they came. But I did see that probably later on the experiment did work, and I don't know how, probably in a different era or time frame. But I do know that the original DNA comes from several other planets, and they called it the group. And what was interesting is that later on, when I was reading a book by a scientist who wrote about the two clouds in the cosmos, where the Earth is kind of in the middle, and he calls that the group as well. So I find that very interesting, that there is eventually an astronomical how do you say that?
Explanation, maybe, or
Explanation, yes, where they identify certain galaxies together as the group. So I found that very interesting.
so basically that was sort of your experience of the beginning of the downfall of Atlantis. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And so how would you tie that to what's happening on Earth now, or is there any tie?
Yes, I would. I think when the whole pandemic started, and of course it seems already past and long forgotten.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But when that started, I noticed that the clients that were coming to me, they all seemed to have had memories of Atlantis. And they were so significant. I thought, why are all these people having suddenly memories about Atlantis and going back to past lives in Atlantis? And then I realized, I think the experiment is a trigger. How the Atlanteans were doing experiments with DNA and creating new species. And I think there are certain elements in the whole pandemic and what was happening that has some kind of similar themes to it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And yeah.
Right, without getting too specific. Because
exactly.
We're still on YT.
Yeah.
Okay, exactly.
We kind of
exactly.
want to stay there as long as we can, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And so this has just been
Maybe it's
such a good conversation. We are almost nearing our,
Well, I did want
but
to bring
we
up.
do want to have, we have a few more.
I just wanted to bring up the whole Bermuda Triangle aspect and where I grew up. I grew up on Lake Michigan, or right, just less than a half a mile from lakeshore of Lake Michigan, but at the very top of Wisconsin, Door County area, there's a series of little islands out there, but there's a place out there that's associated with the same type of energy as the Bermuda Triangle. They call it the Devil's Triangle, but there's been very mysterious happenings that have taken place over hundreds of years there with ships and planes and different things, seeing crafts. So when you brought up the point that there are, many aspects of that, as well as Atlantis, aspects of that, of these I call them way stations or portals, or,
Yeah.
like you said, like a train station. There are so many places around the planet that have that energetic signature that you can almost look at the planet as being like a piece of Swiss cheese, full of holes that you can go from one point to another at any particular point. So the fact that, there's this place in Lake Michigan, you've got the Bermuda Triangle, other places in other bodies of water that have very similar aspects, these are still very active portals. And we also channeled about the portals that are on the East Coast of the United States. It's basically half of a portal, and the other half of it is on the European coast, because at one point they were married together. They split, so you have these two portals that are a half of one another. So
And they're
like a
going to
mirror.
reactivate
Right, they're
and
gonna
join again as we
energetically
go through
join
this
themselves again.
ascension
So everything that you were talking about, it was just like, oh yes, this is all confirmation. This is we channeled. So it's beautiful. It's amazing. So
I love when there's just the crossover, that nexus
Right?
point.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Did
so
you have
cool.
more notes that you want to?
No, well, thank you for asking. No, I mean, we could go in so many different directions
Yeah.
with it, and I'm
This
just
is
going,
fascinating.
rein it in, Sam. Oh my God.
So Patricia, you still offer astrological readings, BQH, QHHT. Tell us, if our audience members want to get in touch with you, what do you offer and how can they get in touch with you?
Yes. Well, they can get in touch with me through the quantum healing form, of course, and also through my website, which is just my name, patriciagrootjens.com. And I do offer the sessions, although not too often, because I'm mostly focused on providing courses. I create courses around astrology and quantum healing. And at the moment, I'm creating courses around the dwarf planet astrology, and which is very fascinating. And I'm writing books, of course. So that's what I do. I mostly focus on the courses and the writing of the books. So and I do love to offer astrology readings because it's always so fascinating. Yeah.
Amazing.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, all of your contact information will be there in the description. My goodness, we might have to have you back again because
think
you're
so.
a fountain of knowledge with so many different topics that are electric for us.
Yes.
So I want to thank you so much, Patricia, for joining us today. We really appreciate your presence.
I really enjoyed it, and I'm really happy that you invited me for this conversation. And I feel that there was so much overlap, and of course, I'm curious to see if anyone comes up with the potential meaning of those numbers. Yeah.
And if we do, we will probably put something in the comments, but also we may do a little update on one of our podcasts. So do
Yes.
look at the descriptions of our podcasts if you're interested. And if you guys know out in the audience and you're getting an intuitive hit, please put something in the comments or email us or reach out to Patricia or however you want to do that. But let us know.
Definitely.
Even if you don't think you're sure, go ahead and trust yourself and let us know. But I want to thank our audience for joining us. Please hit that thumbs up, share away. Please subscribe. That also helps to get these messages out. We are so grateful that you joined us again today on Out on a Limb podcast. So until next time,
See y'all.
see you later.